how do you get to a trusted cloud? And he had things up there, a virtual TPM, an HSM, a hardware security module in the cloud. I mean, these things don't exist. And he would like to see them. But the thing is, you can't stop taking advantage of the cloud while you're waiting for these things to get invented. How best can you take advantage of the cloud today? Well, here is an architecture. If you apply this architecture and you were able to write the application yourself, you could take advantage of the cloud. Now, to what percentage of the cloud can you take advantage? It depends on your business and your data. If only 5–10% of your data is sensitive, then 90 to 95% of your data can be processed and stored in the cloud. But if your business is such where 40% of it is sensitive, then you may have to do some more evaluation. Does it make sense? Does it make sense at all to go into the cloud if so much of your data needs to be going back and forth between the public zone and the regulated zone? Because even if you send an MRI or an X-ray into the cloud, the assumption is that the huge file is already encrypted in the regulated zone, and the key that can decrypt it is always in the regulated zone. It's never in the cloud. So in order to decrypt it, to show the X-ray to a doctor, you're going to have to pull that file back from the cloud down and decrypt it in your regulated zone and then display it over a controlled channel to the doctor or the nurse or whoever it is. So just like client-server changed the paradigm from monolithic applications. So in the original monolithic applications, mainframe, mini-server world, everything just went back to a central computer. The display, the I/O, the processing, the storage, it all happened in one box. Client-server changed that. There was now a protocol. The GUI came out to your desktop, but the back-end processing handled different kinds of things. Some of the business rules that process front-end processing came into the GUI. The back-end processing handled different kinds of business rules. Storage always was on the back-end. Cloud brings a similar shift. You're now going to have to think about how do you take advantage of the cloud. Now, you may be lucky that in your business you don't have any sensitive data at all, and you can take the whole thing into the cloud. Wonderful work, but that's not the way it is for most people. There's all the...
I may be missing something, but I mean, like if I had an e-commerce, an app, I get, well, whatever it is. Anyway, open cart or something. I mean, I put that on an Amazon account, so everything's out there. So this wouldn't work in that case.
No,
because it was a virtual server with virtual data.
If you're putting everything in Amazon right now, then you have no control.
Okay.
You cannot prove that you are compliant to PCI DSS if you're collecting credit card data.
Okay.
Because your key is in the cloud, the credit card goes into the cloud, so where's your control? Because some unseen person somewhere in the world has control of the hypervisor. And all they have to do is push a button and your entire machine image can be saved to disk and you won't even know it.
So, with this redirection, do I have to code this, say if I'm writing this fancy app, or is there some kind of transparent...
You have to code it. You have to code it.
Okay.
So you have to, once you've classified the data, you are now going to be looking at the business transactions. And you have to lay out the business transactions according to the data. So now if you know that your business transaction uses class 1 data, which is sensitive, you know by definition that the form is going to have to go to the regulated zone.
And then that whole form would already be served from the regulated zone, right? Because of the fact
only to the point where the sensitive data needs to be processed.
Right.
Once that's done, it may very well redirect you completely to the cloud zone.
It's sort of like when you buy something somewhere and then it pops you over to PayPal and afterwards you come back, right?
That's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
It's identical.
Okay.
It's identical. The only difference is now, instead of going into PayPal, you're going into the cloud, or your regulated zone.
Or your own enterprise.
Exactly. Exactly.
So this is a box I'd be running in my office.
Yep.
This is it.
Or in our data center that you
Co-lo.
chose. Exactly. The important thing, what auditors want to see is who has control of the keys, the encryption keys. And right now, PCI DSS requires that a minimum of 2 people must be responsible for the key. If that key is in the cloud, you don't have control over that key right now. So there's no point even discussing it any further. I mean, you probably haven't gone through a PCI DSS questionnaire. That's the reason why it's in the cloud. If it were in the if you had to go through an audit, it would have failed, guaranteed.
He had a question. Oh, you were talking about the redirect from the user's point of view is using an iframe and pulling the data from the separate sources, pretty much the same thing.
Exactly the same thing. It can be a single frame, multiple frames, it all depends on your application. Once Pushkar has this working, there's a tiny little application that we will demonstrate, and he's smiling. No, he's not. That's because he's trying to set up a cloud on that laptop. It was all working.
I can get you some time to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
2 minutes. Yeah, so I think we talked about this at the last meetup because we sidetracked a lot last time.
I know, about cryptography.
Yeah.
That's why I felt this was important to
So
talk about.
if my cloud actually is supposed to do something with the data, then obviously having the tokens prevents me literally from processing that data. So for example, if I want to use the cloud to process the X-ray for, say, analysis,
Yeah,
I can't do
you
it.
cannot
right?
do that. You cannot do that today.
So it's really
You have to
mostly
bring
for
the
storage.
X-ray back
Yeah.
into the regulated zone.
That limits very much what I can do with the cloud then, right? Because often I want to...
But it all depends on your data, right? It
Yeah,
all
of course.
depends on your data and what your application is.
Yeah,
In an X-ray, I can clearly understand there's a problem. But there is also another possibility. Why is an X-ray dangerous to put in the cloud? Because it can be associated with an individual. But what if the X-ray did not have anything to identify the individual except some number?
By European Data Protection Directive, I think it's still your information, so it's still regulated.
But how do you prove that it's your information?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's your information.
It doesn't matter, it's there.
If there is your information, it belongs to you. That's the thing. And plus, you could identify people through, for example, their whatever fillings in their teeth and stuff. So it's the question where you draw the line. So in
Yeah,
Europe,
that's
for
the thing.
sure, they're
That's
pretty
the thing.
stringent.
That's the thing. If the line were drawn at a point where you really couldn't identify, if I put 10 X-rays in front of you and you really couldn't identify whose it was,
Sure.
does it matter at that point?
No.
For some people it still would matter because they're not comfortable with that notion. But the architecture is flexible. You can choose to encrypt what you want, or choose not to encrypt it or just scrub parts of it and put it out there.
So what's the percentage of what you think of like apps out there or cloud usage where I can actually use this? What's the percentage? Because I mean, we're
My
talking
guess is that,
Netflix
like
wouldn't
he
work, for
said,
example.
so Netflix apparently is storing everything in the cloud.
Yeah, so that it wouldn't work because the point is that they're using the cloud to get the bandwidth for the streaming.
Yeah,
so
correct.
you can't encrypt it, and I think it's a lot.
No, they're actually encrypting it. They are using DRM. He didn't mention that yesterday.
It's not really, they don't care probably. It's not really sensitive.
Probably. They probably have to do just enough to prove to the studios that they have protected the content,
Exactly.
but how much protection, that's a debatable question. If you talk to an average movie viewer, oh my God, I can't break it. But if you talk to a cryptographer, they probably laugh at it. So it all depends on the perspective. But the point is,
I believe that they're doing also a kind of a version of what you've been showing, that they keep the customer data, like credit card information,
Private.
all of the
Exactly.
super sensitive
Secure.
information. They do exactly.
it cannot be in the cloud.
It's the only
because
part
you
that
cannot.
they're trying to deal with that now from
Right.
the last. I was talking about a CSA meetup, the security guy there, and yeah, he said that everything except for
It's
customer
really
data.
the regulated data, right?
Yeah.
So I sent the gentleman I met yesterday this paper, waiting to see what he has to say about it. But
He's probably going to say nothing matter here.
that's going to happen.
I'm still trying to
understand a use case where this truly makes sense. Is this something that's new, theoretical, or is it something you built for a customer at this point? Do you have a customer using it? Maybe talk about a real.
There is one customer who is using this, and actually they kind of